Welcome to Middle East Observer with me, Nicholas Richardson. Fuel prices are set to grow this year, or at least that's what the media want us to believe. Russia wages war on the West, not only by rockets and shells fired on Ukraine, but also by limiting the oil, natural gas and coal available to the West. The Kremlin thinks that record-setting energy prices will present a clear choice to the West. Either you give up support for Ukraine, or this winter you'll face freezing cold, high inflation and high unemployment. 40 years ago, the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, responded to a similar threat by aligning with Saudi Arabia, which flooded the market with cheap oil. The evil empire, his description of the Soviet Union, crumbled within a decade. According to analysts, the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden, boarded Air Force One bound for the Middle East to repeat that response, or, at the very least, to give the world a break from rising oil prices and help Democrats in the upcoming midterm elections. With gasoline at over $5 a gallon, the prospect of losing Congress and the Senate looks certain. When the Democrats came to power, they abandoned the policies of Donald Trump. In the Middle East, the new administration cooled relations with Tel Aviv and Riyadh in favor of strengthening the Palestinian camp and resetting talks with Iran. Both the American media and government distanced themselves from Riyadh and the 36-year-old heir to the Saudi throne, Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, who became public enemy number one. Even during the election campaign, Biden himself announced that he would block the implementation of arms contracts worth $100 billion and would make the kingdom and MBS pariahs. After winning, Biden kept this election promise. Saudi Arabia, plagued by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, has stopped receiving material replenishment for the Patriot missile system. Democrat-friendly media attacked MBS for human rights violations, demanded justice for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, killed at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and promoted cyber dissidents such as Saad al-Yabri, a former Kingdom of Saudi Arabia intelligence chief who called the Saudi heir to the throne psychopaths dangerous to world security. Biden's administration left the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia not in the best mood, but not in hopelessness. Some form of punishment had to be imposed for a year and a half of the wrong policy. This is essential for reasons of prestige and reputation. And MBS, having ambitions equal to the capital at his disposal, wants to be the leader of the Arab and Muslim worlds. It is extremely important that the United Arab Emirates President, Mohammed bin Zayed, was invited to Washington. The UAE is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's smaller cousin, and often Riyadh leads its policy through Abu Dhabi, which never operates independently of its bigger cousin. Besides, Dubai was supposed to be an experiment and a model for the present Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the invitation of the UAE leader means that a dialogue and a behind-the-scenes reset on the Washington-Riyadh line has begun, and at least the Arabs want to go back to what was before the democratic errors and distortions era. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Dr. Bogdan Shafransky, an expert on the economy and on American affairs. Dr. Shafransky, thank you very much for joining us. And could we sum up in a few words the impact of President Biden's visit to the Middle East?
President Biden believes in diplomacy. His famous article almost 3 years ago in Foreign Affairs magazine, he promised that American diplomacy would be back, and he expected during his visit to Middle East that diplomacy should work, but we may say he failed.
Yes. Now, Democrats, of course, are very strong on human rights, and they've been very vociferous about the murder of the journalist in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and the genocide in Yemen. How is President Biden able to sort of reconcile these two approaches? On the one hand, the Democrats' very strong view on human rights, and at the same time his visit, which is clearly influenced by a need to have some form of realpolitik.
We may say that he would prefer to talk to different representatives of the Saudis, but he could talk only to what he was to Crown Prince, and he is not the favorite person for him and for media in the United States. But it's just the real life. So he had to deal with the person who nobody likes in the U.S. media, and he named prince crowned pariah, as you said. The beginning, the introduction to this visit was very poor. So Saudis never intended to welcome President Biden, and the result of his visit was as Saudis expected, not as President Biden expected to accomplish anything.
Yeah, now, some commentators say, of course, that what we're actually seeing is, by Joe Biden, a return to the pro-Saudi policy of the former president, President Trump. Could we say, therefore, or is it fair to say that in actual fact, the president has wasted 1.5 years pursuing a pointless policy, the Democrat policy, that is?
Now, we may say to this question, yes. And this visit was more like a follow-up of President Trump's visit and relationships with Saudi Arabia. This 1.5 years, it was a very waste of time. And now it's crucial for the American economy, for the global economy, to improve these relationships, to persuade Saudi Arabia and OPEC countries to increase production and export of oil, but it's not easy.
Yeah, well, I think that you make an interesting point. I mean, one of the things which many people may, of course, have forgotten is that the United States these days does not actually need to import oil from Saudi Arabia, and rather surprisingly, is itself exports or produces a similar amount of oil. So, given that the United States is no longer dependent on Middle East oil, why is President Biden setting such big store by going to Saudi Arabia and saying to the Saudis, please produce more oil? Is it an attempt to see himself as a leader of the Americans sort of helping the world economy?
Obviously, it was his expectation that not only American voters would appreciate this visit and the results, but also other countries, European countries. Problem is the price. It's about $100 now. So without lowering this price, which is a global one, so even if United States, there is no need to import oil from Middle East, the price is that high also in the United States. So gas prices are also high, about this $5.
Yes. And yes, is it possible to say anything about what the Saudis themselves think of all this sudden volte-face, this about turn by the United States? Have they expressed an opinion? Do we know what that opinion is?
Well, we may only say what the official announcements are. We don't know what they discussed behind the closed doors, but we may assume that Saudis wouldn't follow President Biden's lead, and they are not that sympathetic to President Biden's cause. So it's very difficult for President Biden's supporters in the United States to claim any success after this visit.
Although I think I read that the Saudis have agreed in July and August to produce more oil than they had intended. So maybe that's a small bonus.
But without any firm commitments. So it's just, I would say, diplomatic promise, not a firm commitment.
And when we look at because we always have to, we're dealing with the Americans, as you know, when we look at the wider political context, do you see this visit by Joe Biden to the Middle East, particularly to Saudi Arabia, as helping the Democrats in the upcoming midterm elections? Has it been, from a political point of view, been a good visit?
Not at all. Obviously, President Biden wanted to improve his rating, but after this visit, we may rather expect that his rating might be a little bit lower. So this visit wouldn't help Democratic Party during this midterm elections this coming November. It's very disappointing for the Democratic Party, this visit.
So it's really not brought the benefits which, from a political point of view, I think there have also been some sort of wider benefits generally, and it's quite interesting. that there's now this greater alignment, or between, if we can call it alignment, between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I mean, one of the minor things, which well, not really minor, but that Saudi will now allow civilian Israeli aircraft to overfly Saudi airspace, going from A to B.
But it's not important for American voters.
No, well,
such accomplishments are not important. Important would be a substantial lowering of gas prices, and we may not expect to see this result.
So in that sense, you're right. I think the Americans, compared to the Europeans, take a very American-based view of life. And whereas from a political point of view, and indeed a diplomatic point of view, we may see some degree of success from this visit, you're saying your conclusion remains that in actual fact, from a domestic political agenda, which is obviously the thing which matters most in America, the Democrats have not really achieved as much or anything of value from this visit.
Yes, I agree with your assessment. It's also my assessment of this visit that for this coming midterm election in November, now many people expect that not only Senate might be lost by the Democratic Party, but there is a danger to lose also Congress. So it might be very difficult for President Reagan to govern.
President Biden, yes.
President Biden to govern.
Yes, I like you. I sometimes think the world would be a better place if we had Reagan back. But I mean, that's very much the
introduction.
Yes, that's very much a personal view. And do you think also, looking at the political, this failure, or in domestic terms, of the visit to the Middle East is a reflection of America's changed place in the world? And I ask that because at the same time, we also know that the President Putin is in Iran, sort of building up seeking to build up an anti-Western coalition. And of course, also resources, oil is very much a feature of that, given the potential of the Iranian fuel market.
Yes, President Biden believed in diplomacy. He promised American diplomacy would be back, but we see that it's not working. His meetings with Vladimir Putin a year ago and what Russia demanded from the West, from the United States last fall, is a clear failure of diplomacy, and now we have a war and Putin in Tehran. So it's very difficult to believe that diplomacy may start working soon.
Let me ask you, it's probably an unfair question, but since we have your expertise available for the program, if you were to, this afternoon, fly to Washington to advise President Biden to do something with the Middle East, what would it be? What would you say is the thing he should do?
In my opinion, this visit was a mistake. So at this moment, maybe United States may get some results in Israel, but with this coming election in Israel and Netanyahu possibly might become the Prime Minister of Israel again, even a visit to Israel may not accomplish anything.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. I hope you'll be able to join us again on a future programme. As usual, the clock has defeated us, but this is a fascinating subject and it's not going to go away. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Middle East Observer. Thank you for watching.